So continuing this video, I feel like they were making me shit while I was making the video using these electronic devices. Just got done using the video, but I was talking about Leanne and Cloudsdale. Went to why I saw her at the hospital, and then I see her at England. I don't know what the story to this is, but this is one of the reasons why I believe that there was some sort of hope. Because, you know, all the women have been extracted in this city and so many cities and places I've been. They've completely been taken away from me, completely. And it's strictly only the queers and transgenders that are responsible for doing this. So they don't allow the women to communicate with me at all. They don't even allow them to be within the same building as me or drive by within my distance, because they know that women will try to reach out to me. Because women are loving, transgender females are not. They're very hateful and very mentally sick and disgusting people. They're not loving people like real females. They're very bitter and they're very disgusting. Very hateful people. And so what happens is I end up, this is a story about Alicia Zarate. I talked about Robert Zarate getting killed in a car wreck with Edward, and Edward having an identical twin that I didn't know, that I saw him in New York at a bus stop. And I thought I wanted to talk about this because Robert Zarate, I talked about, had a sister named Alicia. And I don't know if Alicia is allowed to see this or not, but we went to the Olive Garden and we ate at a restaurant, and I don't know if it was her, but I had suspicions that maybe she got into a bad car wreck and was really like injured on the side of her face, like she got burned pretty bad. I don't know if this is true. I talked about this because I remember looking at her and she had something like makeup or something on her face that may have showed that maybe there was an injury. Now I don't know if Rodrigo had punched her, because it had happened before many years ago I remember. And Robert didn't like it, Jesse knew about it, Mary knew, but nobody liked it, and they were all shaking up. But anyway, I know they're divorced now, but this is what I want to say about Alicia. Okay, when I was 18, Robert died, like 2 weeks before my 19th birthday. We bury him. For 3 or 4 months later, Robert's dad then dies. And I wasn't able to attend his dad's funeral. I was told a week ahead of time. I didn't attend. I not only was feeling really bad, I was so overwhelmed in my own life. I was just destroyed. And I felt really bad. I wanted to go, but I was just felt like I was destroyed. And many years later, I'd take flowers, you know, still visit Robert and Robert Sr.'s grave to this day. And, you know, I went out there and, yeah, I wanted to say I was 19 years old. I moved back into the house, and Alicia, I think, they planned to start moving out of their house. I think it was like they moved out like 6 months after, or within a couple of months after Robert Sr. died, because Selena, I think she's a transgender. I didn't know that. She ends up moving in, and within a year after her move-in, Robert dies. And I remember once Robert died, Alicia didn't want to stay there. She left like she didn't want to stay there. She could have, she didn't get run out. This is a story that I want to talk about because I don't know if there was a Dream Makeovers edition. I don't know what was going on, but this is what somebody told me. This is what I knew because I talked to her, but somebody told me some information I'll share here in a minute. But she moved out of the house, and she said she stayed there for like 3 months or 2 months after Robert died, after Robert's dad died, and she moved out. She didn't want to live there. And you could tell, to my understanding, it wasn't a good, like she got ran out of the house, and it wasn't, she needed to leave. So her and Rodrigo ended up getting an apartment. And Um, I visited their apartment one time, and she was pregnant, and she was crying, and she was staying. She was in her apartment. I remember it was a very, very surreal, solemn situation, and she was pregnant. There was nothing that I could do, and they had a baby. They had a baby room set up inside the apartment with cribs and everything, and they named Robert. Alicia named one of her sons after Bubba. After Robert died, her brother, which they named him Robert. And anyway, I went there once and I never went again because I had just gotten my apartment. I turned 20 years old. And my dad had just died as well, and it was like I went to their apartment like 3 months after I moved into my apartment to visit them, and that was it. A couple of months later, I never went to talk to him ever again. Until I was 27 and with Alicia at the Olive Garden, but that's way years down the road, and that's unrelative to what's going on. I'm 20 years old, visit them, and they wanted to leave. They didn't want to leave because there seemed to have been something wrong with this Selena person. They didn't like or feel welcome in their own house. And keep in mind that Alicia and Robert Senior, they were brother and sister. They were full blown family together. It was everything. Mary, the other people would visit. When Selena moved in, which I don't know was a transgender or not, and I think there was problems. There was problems with Alicia that she didn't like. I could tell that she didn't like. You could just, because real females don't like to be around transgenders because they're very disgusting. They're very nasty, dark soul people, the way they described it even to other females. And the females, are real natural females are completely different. They don't understand that. And they're just hateful because of that. Because they want to be females and they're not the real deal. And then so they're very disgusting. They're not content with their life. So what happens is I think it was like within 4 or 5 months after leaving Rodrigo's and Alicia's house. I'm 20 years old. I think I just turned 21, or maybe I was still 20. And I went to go get my haircut. Now this is what I want to share. I went to go get my haircut at Beto's Uptown Cuts in Carrollton, Texas, who has a barbershop still to this very day next to Newman Smith High School. And everybody, all the Mexicans go there. This is like the hood. All the blacks and Mexicans, but it's primarily a Mexican joint. It's a Mexican barbershop. You know how like they have like the movie, barbershop where it's all blacks? Okay, well this barbershop is nothing but Mexicans. You have like one black or two black. Yeah, he's hired a couple of black barbers, but it's Mexican primarily. All the Mexicans go there. It's a hood. It's for the Latins. And he has the black community always show up there. It's the black and Mexican community. There's not very many white people that go there. Sometimes there is, but not many at all. It's the colored joint. Everybody gets along, very nice, elegant, cool, retro, cool hip hop kind of barbershop. And I've known Beto, his name is Beto. I know like my uncle. He's a little short guy. I've known him since I was like 13 or 14 years old because he used to work at Snip Cuts on Josie Lane near R.L. Turner. There used to be a record store and there used to be a Pizza Hut, and it's right next. It's like 100 yards away from the Kroger store. It's on It used to be on Josie and Valwood. And sorry, they're making me itch. So I'm there at Beto's Uptown Cuts. At Snip Cuts. And I met him when I was like 13 or 14 years old because the word at that Snip Cuts, all the Mexicans used to go there. Everybody from Turner, Newman Smith, DeWitt Perry, Vivian Field. I lived in a pretty heavy Mexican community, Latins, and all the Latins went there. Like, we all knew this was a Latin place. The Latins, you know. You get to white women, but it was just Latins. And we show up there, and I met him because he was legendary for giving good haircuts. Everyone always talked about how good of a haircut he can give because everyone was really into fades, and he could cut really good, like better than any barber you could imagine. He was very artistic. So I end up meeting him there with Robert Girardi. And all the other friends that I knew used to go to him as well. So they all talked to him. And anytime you got a haircut by him, you always had to tip him well. Always. And he'd get mad when you wouldn't. But you always had to tip him well. And, you know, anyway, I went there. Robert Girardi knew who he was. Went to his apartment a couple of times to pick up drugs, even when I was like 16 years old. And I was with Robert in my brother's truck once, which I rarely drove my brother's truck ever with too many time places, very few, maybe like less than 10 times my entire life. And I just happened to this one day, I think, because Robert needed a ride somewhere, and I took him, and it was to Bethel's apartment. And I remember him telling me, and I think he went because he used to sell cocaine, and he was a big trafficker to weed. So I'm like, I think I was 16? No, I was like 17 or 18 years old. I was 18 years old. Yeah, I think I was 18 years old when Bethel opened up his own barbershop in Uptown Cuts, which is still on Josie, but it's instead of our turn now it's Newman Smith. It's right by, I think it used to be a Herrera's now, but there's like a Target, a Chili's. It's right by the George Bush Freeway on Josie Lane. There's a Party City, there's a Blockbuster, O'Reilly Auto Shop, there's a donut shop. In fact, it's he built right next door, or 2 store offices down. You know where I talked about that I used to go with Frankie to his karate classes and just watch him do his karate? And well, that place, Mr. Hans or whatever his was, 2 offices down is where Bethel built his barbershop. And we were there. I went there, and I got there my first haircut when I was like 19, I think, or 20. But I heard he had opened it up, so I finally went there. And I don't remember when the first time I went, when he opened up. I think when he opened up, I went there within 6 months or 3 months. And but anyway, I regularly went there to get my haircut while I lived in my apartment. And I'm 20 years old. After I visit Alicia, and I just turned 21, or about to turn 21, and I go to get my hair cut by Bethel. And by this time, I'm not really getting my hair cut too much by him, because he apparently is usually he's the owner, and he's the upscale owner, so more people always give him like $40 tips and stuff, and I didn't have that kind of money. And he was more on the whole money thing, and as opposed to, and I talked to him very comfortable, because I had bought drugs from him before. I bought cocaine from him before with Daniel Boggs. I bought weed from him several times. Robert Girardi actually bought a whole bunch of weed. He was buying hydro, and he spent like $400, and he was buying hydro, and he was selling weed for him when he died. And this is a true story. He was actually selling weed for Bethel, hydro, because he started selling hydro and weed because all the Mexicans and all the young guys were going to Uptown Cuts, and he was making a lot of money. He was making money on the shop, and he was selling weed, hydro, and that's how he was able to do it. So he was making this guy probably made his shop and the drugs he was selling, I bet he was probably making over $100,000 a year. But he didn't flash his money as much as people liked, and he was very suspicious of people, very suspicious of people. He was always like that. But he came over to Robert Girardi's house. I seen him 3 or 4 times, and I've known Robert my whole life. And he was selling weed for Robert. He got along with Robert really well, and we used to joke around and stuff. So anyway, I'm 21 years old. I'm at this barber shop, and I begin to tell him that Robert died, and it says he wasn't at the funeral, and I said, Robert died. What do you know what had happened? Were you selling weed with him? Because he had a lot of weed, and he told me, yeah. He goes, yeah. He had an ounce of hydro, which is worth like $700 or $600. And it turns out that Robert had his weed stolen from his room, and they knew who did it. And there was only one person that did it, and Alicia told me it was Daniel Box. And I don't know what it was. It was like, I don't know exactly the whole thing to it, but he had the cash and the weed in his drawer, and Alicia knew about it, and she went to his room to look for it, and it was gone. And she had said something. And so what happens is that we end up, like, I'm thinking, like, I can't believe Daniel, at this time stole. This is a long time ago. I forgave him. Scott Springer stole $500 from me, or $400, like $200 of cash and like an ounce of weed from me, hydro, and he broke into my house and safe. He did this many years ago, but I forgave him. But he took the money from Daniel. Daniel took the money after he died, and like went into it because Alicia told me that she was skirting for his weed and money, or looking for something, and she was very suspicious, and I didn't know what the fuck's going on. At that time, Daniel was very in a bad, dark place. Daniel Box was in a very dark place in his life. There's a lot of stuff that was going on. He was living in his truck. Robert Zarate let him live in his house, and then he was stealing money and weed from him, and Robert Zarate told me he had to tell him to leave because he kept on stealing from him. And he said it hurts me to do that, but he said he kept on stealing money from him, weed. And he says he's lying about it. And he's like, man, I feel bad for him, but man, I don't know what to do. And everybody knew he was very generous. And anyway, so I go to this barber shop, 21 years old, and when I'm talking to him, he goes, yeah, I was buying weed. He goes, I knew he was buying weed. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah, that's who I thought it was. And I told him, I was like, well, Daniel was living there. And he goes, yeah, that's who I think it was. And so he ends up finding out that, or believe Daniel's the one that stole his money, because it was Bethel's money. And I wasn't too involved in that drug deals or anything. I just knew about it. He was making extra money, a little extra money on the side. And what happens is that he tells me in the conversation, I said, do you know what happened to the house? He goes, all the family moved out. And he goes, Alicia doesn't live there no more, and Mary and all that. Everyone seemed to broke up. And you know what Bethel tells me? This guy I've known for a long time. He tells me that Alicia, because he knew Alicia, he's pretty decent, and he knew Mary, and he knew, he had met Senior Zarate a couple times, because it was coming into the house. It was a different welcoming entrance when you came into a Latin house, and like it's a little bit different. You're more welcomed, and the communication is just different. And so we went. He was in the house, met, and Alicia had seen him numbers of times. And anyway, when I'm sitting getting my hair cut, Bethel tells me that there was a big fight between Alicia and Selena and Mary, saying that that Alicia or Selena got into a fight, a real bad fight over the house, because his dad owned that house on 1000 Cherrywood, and in his estate. So I don't know if the house is paid off for. To my understanding, I don't think it was. It could have been paid off for, but I don't think it was. And I know that he said he had bought that house because his first wife died, and he got some insurance money, and that's how he was able to put a big down payment on getting a house like that. So he ends up tells me that they got not a physical fight, but it was a very verbal, nasty fight between Alicia and Selena, which is, I think, a transgender. I had no idea up until now that once they moved out because they got into a fight or some argument about the house, that Selena was going to steal the money and how she was going to steal the house, that Alicia and Mary and Christina, Selena and like several people were threatening Alicia, and they were threatening her, and they were threatening Mary, and they were also threatening Selena as well. And she said, and they started making a lot of harassing phone calls to her house. And he told me this. He said, yeah, man, he goes, they were calling Selena and they were harassing her all the time. They said that because she stole the house, so they said Alicia, Mary, Christina started to threaten her because that's their dad's house. She just moved in like a year before he died. And no more than 2 years. But I'm going to say it was like a year. Because I was 18. Yeah, it was about 2 years, and then he had died. But Selena ended up stealing everything, is what I was told. And because she ended up getting married with Robert Sr., and she stole all the house and everything there. And that's what Bethel told me, that there was a big fight between them, and then because Selena kicked out Alicia and all the other kids out of the house, and then they started making random phone calls to the house, calling Selena, said, we're gonna come after you. It's like, you're a fucking bitch. They said that they were calling her a bitch, and they were calling her a thief over the phone, and they did that for a couple of times because she ended up inheriting everything, and Alicia didn't get anything, and I was her dad. And I said, really, is that what happened, Beto? And he's telling me, yeah. And I had a conversation about him, about Billy's murder. Billy was a guy that I knew when I was 18. I was 18 years old when he got murdered. 18 or 19. And yeah, I was 18 or 19. He got murdered. And I used to box with him. I knew him many years ago, and we were really good friends. He was Robert Zarati's cousin. He knew Alicia. He used to eat dinner with us. Rodrigo, Mary knew him very well. We all went together, movies. And he was murdered by some sort of drug deal. To me, it made no sense why he was murdered. He was kidnapped, tied up, thrown in the back of a truck, or back of a trunk, or back in the back of a car after being beat up by 10 people at a party. And they drove him to an open field, and they put a bag over his head, and they executed him. It was like a full-blown execution. I could never understand. If you were to say the total opposite of someone to deserve something like that, it made no sense. It absolutely made no sense why something, because he didn't fit the picture. I knew him very well. I smoked weed with him. I think I may have done cocaine with him maybe once or twice. But I don't even know if I ever did. I think I just smoked weed with him. And we used to box together. We used to work out together. But he was, it didn't make any sense. He met some drug dealers, and he went off one day to just meet some random people because I knew some of the people he knew. And it was just total strangers. He went to a party, they jumped him, and then they murdered him. And they didn't find his body until 3 weeks, or like 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was, in an open field, and his body was decomposing. He had been died, and the animals and bugs, the animals in the wilderness had, dismantled his body, his remains. I thought it was crazy. Alicia, Mary called me one day, and I ran over to Billy's house when I was told that he was missing. Said something had happened, and I felt like he was murdered or something bad, and I was knocking on his door looking for his dad. What happened, whatever, and I never heard from him again. Nobody was there at the house. That was it. And he was just murdered. I never heard about the funeral. I never was told anything else, and life went on. I didn't understand how somebody could get murdered and never heard anything else again. and he was a kid. I think he had just graduated high school or was about to graduate. I think he had just graduated, and so anyway, I talked to Bethel about this, and this is what's even more crazy. And I've made videos about this. And Bethel told me he thinks he knows who did it. He thinks he knows. He told me, and he said, he goes, yeah, I think maybe, he goes, yeah, I have an idea. He goes, there's a couple of people that I think that could probably lead me to that. And I said, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't know. There's a few of them, but I think maybe someone might know someone or know somebody that, because let me tell you, everyone I talked about this with Albert, who I threw a party when I went to high school with. I mean, I didn't go to high school with him, but I knew him through Adrian and Robert Girardi, and I threw a party, and he was kind of around the clique of people that I knew when I was 20 years old. And I threw a party, and I knew him, hung out. He was kind of like a bodyguard for me. So he used to get his hair cut over, and I talked to him at Uptown Cuts when I was 21, and even when I was 23, and I talked about it with several other people. That guy, Bethel, that guy from the haircut, Uptown Cuts, that guy knows a lot of drama. He knows a lot of shit. That guy if there's everyone I've ever met that knows a lot of drama and a lot of inside deep crazy shit, this guy knew it. He for some reason, he had a really nifty way of talking to people. And he always was coming in contact and making connections like crazy with people. No, like better than anyone I've ever met. And drug deals, dangerous people. There was a lot of people envied him. I don't know why people envied him. A lot of people envied him, that guy. But he told me I was getting a haircut. He said he thinks that someone that could lead him to believe that who killed him and murdered him. And I said, what? I said, what? Who do you think? And I couldn't say, who do you think? And I was like, and he didn't want to tell me. Why would you tell me that? Because I remember him feeling compassion about Robert's death, but he knew Billy as well. So eventually I was told that I think I was like 20, 21 or 22. I was like 21. I was told that they found the guy that killed him like a year after Billy was murdered, but I would have been 20 years old. They found, but I was never told anything. They caught him, they found who he was, and they found out who he was. I don't know any details about it, but they found the person that did it. I don't know what the story details. I wasn't informed anything else from Alicia or Mary. Mary's the one that called me, and I never heard from him again. And I thought it was important for me to talk about because this guy at Bethel, and I really wanted to focus more on the whole idea. I know that I made videos on this, but I don't know if I'd ever discussed that Selena started making a lot of threatening calls, and they got into a big argument fight over the house, and they were also Selena and all these other people. They were eventually going after Selena and Alicia very bad for the money and saying, I'm going to take all your dad's shit and everything. And Alicia didn't get anything. To my understanding, that was her dad and her brother that died. Her dad and brother died in that house, and that was the family that she had to begin with. She didn't get anything. Like, to my understanding, she didn't get nothing. Zero. And they moved out of the house. And I remember there was like a big fight. There was just a really big fight saying to Selena. The reason I want to talk about this is because I recently talked to Selena Gomez, which is Selena's daughter. And I talked to her. And when I talked to her on the internet, and I talked to her before, many years ago, it seems like she said the same thing that she did before. And she said that, he goes, let me talk to my mom, Alicia and my mother talk. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, she has to be lying, because I knew that Selena and Alicia and Mary, they never got along with each other. They got into a big fight, a big disagreement, because Alicia and Mary didn't get anything, and they, and Selena basically took all the house, and that's what Mary told me. Mary told me that she stole the house and everything. But I thought I'd make a video on that because I'm not trying to get into the limos of what's going on, because I don't know a lot of other information. I don't know if that was Alicia that had maybe her side of her face burnt in a car accident she didn't say anything about. When I saw it at Olive Garden when I was 27, I don't know if there was something else that's going on, but I wanted to talk about that because I'm thinking to myself, well, why is Selena telling me that Alicia? I guess, you know what? I think they maybe forgave each other. That's what I think happened. I think they found mutual grounds, and then maybe that was why. So maybe that did happen. Maybe they did do that, but I knew who Alicia was. If somebody has to leave within a couple of months after your mom and your dad die within like 3 months apart from each other, you can be saving up money there. Then the reason they're leaving is because they don't feel welcome with that person. So thought it'd be, I don't know what the story is. My assumptions is that I think they probably made amends to it and got along. So that's what I think possibly happened. But I knew how Alicia was. I don't think she ever did. I don't think she would. I know she, knowing her. But people change. She had 3 kids, got married, and that was the end of life. I haven't talked to him. Hopefully I'll hear from him one day. Alicia meant a lot to my life. She really did. I remember her very well.